Okay.
Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religion. Today, we have Mike of Speed of Sound of Gravity. Mike, would you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? Because I'm sure to my audience, you're a new arrival.
Let's see. I am a whole bunch of things. Formerly an iron miner. I'm a high school dropout. Also a student of electrical engineering in college. Self-educated in genetics, molecular biology, mathematics, computer science, logic, and what else? Chemistry. Do a lot of self-educating. I'm very much into genetics and studying evolution. And I have a channel where I'm hoping to do education in that field and in some other fields like logic. And the channel is not so good right now, but I'm working on it and we're hoping to get better. So I have no subscribers, so go there and subscribe to me, make me feel better, or I shall become disheartened. That's all I got.
That's great.
Over to you. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, I spoke over you. Go ahead.
Oh, it's over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so we haven't really planned what we're going to talk about today. We eliminated some topics. But generally, since Mike is interested in genetics, I would make a statement about genetics from within my belief system. And I think that should open it up because being a theist, he's probably going to find the idea very, very flawed. And that will certainly make for a conversation. Okay, so what can I say about genetics from within theism? I would say that in a continuous contextual reading of spiritual stories, to include the Bible, that what is being indicated in the quote unquote beginning of God is actually long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, some being that is not us genetically manipulated plants, then animals, and then animals to the point that they came up with what we would today call a human being, but through genetic manipulation, using already known code and manipulating that. And what we see on this earth are samples from that full line of genetic manipulation, and why there are overlaps and gaps, and that a lot of the same genetic material has a lot of the same dysfunctions, showing relationship, but also simultaneously it would explain why you will find a series that makes, say, a certain bone, like the ulna in your arm, is in different places in the genome in different animals. And I can't see any kind of environmental pressure that would be selecting for or any mutation that would make exactly the same code, but just in a different place, and that would serve some advantage.
Okay. So you're talking about Hox genes, or?
I've only read enough of the surveys not to learn all the terminology. I'm not at all educated to that level. But I do find that there is like code or perfectly alike code sometimes in different areas of the genome of any given animal compared to other animals.
Yeah, and they're basically used in many different ways for many different things. The same genes that develop parts of your brain develop parts of your face and your fingers and your arms and your legs, and then across multiple animals. But I see that as not, I don't like the word evidence so much. People dwell on that too much. But I see how that can happen from an evolutionary perspective, where things developed, particularly in the Cambrian, and how these body plans were set up and how things form. Most of I was a little skeptical. It's kind of weird. I mean, I'd always had a background acceptance of evolution and common descent, and But then when I started thinking about it and I started wondering, how does a single cell turn into something like me, or my cats or whatever, or a plant? And so I started looking deeply into that, and I realized that I didn't believe. I mean, it's like, how could this possibly happen? And then the more I looked into embryology and morphogenesis, the more the patterns just looked so obvious to me as to how we descended from other, from common ancestors on all of these different branches. And I can sort of imagine the whole thing in my head. And I think the interesting thing about there's a channel called Standing for Truth where they talk about SpongeBob imagination, like it's a bad thing. But when you learn science, you also imagine. You imagine it every step of the way. You apply it. Like when you learn what sodium chloride is, that it's sodium ion and chlorine ion, and then you look at a table salt, you imagine those little atom balls in there. So you use your imagination all the time in science, and I use it in evolution. And until I can find a stopping point or something that makes no sense at all, I will continue to dig deeper and deeper and try to find those pathways from those single-celled organisms 3 billion years ago to us, that sort of thing. So, but why we believe what we believe is sometimes interesting to look into.
Certainly true. Yeah, I think I'm not certain why the first step of the scientific method is not listed as intuition. It seems experientially to me, it actually is at first an intuition.
I agree.
And you can have an intuitive response because you have studied a topic well enough that your mind starts to add things up gradually. And if you do enough work in that, you will certainly come to new ideas and new ways of looking at things. And usually it's very forward thinking that it would be the next logical step. And how do you test that next logical step and things like that? Yeah.
Yeah. I think intuition is extremely important. It is the first step. I very much agree with that.
Mm.
A lot of
people argue that with me, but anyway.
Well, a lot of scientists don't like to admit it. They don't like to admit the imagination part, and they don't like to admit the intuition part. And they want to talk about evidence and, and evidence, well, that's what I call them lab rats, the people that work in laboratories and actually do all the work. I mean, I'm just some joker on YouTube that uses what they did. I use their hard work to synthesize, what I believe, that sort of thing. But anyway, they're the guys that are obsessed with evidence. I am not so obsessed with that. Intuition, understanding of how things may work is more important to me, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, let's get into what we believe and why.
Okay.
It seems to me that a person who's an evidentialist is using one tool out of their toolbox for everything.
Yeah.
That we have other aspects. And when we don't use them, we're really shorting ourselves. Now, should they go in a certain order? I think so. And I think how I feel about something is probably about the last thing that I should use to test it, but it's certainly going to add in.
Yeah.
I think, I'd like to think, I hope that I do take first intuition and then evidence, then testing, and see what is the most likely with the least amount of assumptions. And then on top of that, having already applied whatever method of truth I use in logic, applying it that way and seeing if it still stands. And then I see if it seems intuitively correct. And then I'll address how I feel about it. But it's definitely true of the human animal that how you feel about it does matter.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I don't know. I'm definitely not a theist. And in fact, I'm an actual atheist, not an agnostic, but an atheist. And I come to that mostly by what I believe about my own mind. And I have a long, strange journey that got me to the beliefs that I hold about mind and consciousness today. And that enters into it. Now, you mentioned aliens or the aliens.
By necessity, the spiritual stories of old are describing themselves as intelligence, plural intelligent beings, who have never lived here, but are telling a story where they arrive en masse, which I think the casual observer, not understanding that from those kinds of stories, would simply scream alien invasion.
Right. Yeah, I'm really skeptical about that. I have in fact, a sponsor of a 12-step program I belong to. My sponsor always talks about. He's really an alien guy, and he keeps giving me, sending me videos and stuff, and I'm skeptical about alien intervention, mostly because of how far away things are. I don't even know if it's ever going to be possible for us to go more than a few light years at the very, very most away from home, no matter how advanced we get. So that's where my skepticism would come from.
I think in the paradigm and mindset that we're presently exercising in technology to travel through space, you'd be correct.
Okay.
But there's no saying that paradigm wouldn't change, that we wouldn't start looking at it a different way.
Yeah.
And there's some things that indicate we should look at it a different way. I mean, if I apply Occam's razor to dark energy and dark matter, I'm already in trouble by saying that.
Yep.
But on the other hand, there's things that we see evidently in reality that can't be explained by dark matter and dark energy and a Big Bang model. Not that I really want to get into that, but you said I am skeptical, and that's great. I consider myself to be very skeptical of things too, and highly analytical and not very forgiving. When you said I am skeptical of the idea, did you mean you're skeptical of the existence of intelligent alien life, or did you mean that you can't find a way in your memory and things you've already reviewed to say that spiritual texts are describing intelligent that don't live here?
Yeah, that's the part I wouldn't believe. That
they're describing it, or that they exist.
I believe they're describing it, but it's coming from it's coming from how we it's mythical archetypes are what we're looking at, and we have these archetypes, and humans as the human mind blossom in evolution, it started to become our habit to create myth, and myth has a structure. It has an element of truth to it. But then if you take most of it literally, you end up getting pretty far from the truth, I think, and you miss the point. So the myth is more like the finger pointing at the moon, and you do not want to mistake the finger for the moon. So
I agree with you completely on that.
But the archetypes are important to us and important in our life. And I think spirituality is important. As human beings, we operate best when we are in a mode that is not so much in our think brain, but more in our feeling and our taking in the world and living as a part of the world. So
that's certainly a decent explanation. Would you identify or define the words both? What were the words you used? You used the word myth or mythos, and you used the word archetype. Would you define those for me?
Oh God, I don't know if I could define them. Let me think.
It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to understand you.
Well, an archetype would be things that are kind of in the deeper part of our minds, like shapes that are in the deeper part of our minds, like parental things that are bigger than us, demons, fearful things. Let's see what else. the earth. I mean, it's almost impossible to put words to archetypes. They have sort of a structure, and I'm trying to think of one. Half of my brain is asleep in the afternoon on Sunday, but and then myth would be, those stories we weave out of our experience, out of our lived experience, in our families, in our tribe, and we extend them and we create these mythical things. Like, for instance, if it's going to storm here shortly, thunderstorms, and if I were to imagine a great bear up in the mountain he's hot and humid and he's going to start throwing lightning swords down at me, I mean, that would be, a mythical structure. And part of that comes from, I know bears, I've seen them. I've actually been chased by them, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We have to get to that story sometime.
Well, last year on my 25,000th day, I went into the North Woods and I walked way back. And on my way back, I had my footprints in the mud. There was a bear paw that was about that big on top of my footprint. But I was chased when I was a kid by a number of bears. If you walked in the woods in northern Minnesota, being chased by a bear was pretty typical. I don't know. It happens.
Okay.
They don't like
Back
to hurt you.
Though. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Anyway, you have the archetype of the bear. And, and you imagine this big bear, because obviously it's going to take a big bear to roar that loud to create the lightning and the thunder. So those are, our mythical aspects, and we have plenty of those. And I think all of the theology is basically based in myth. And I think, but the thing is that there is truth in the myth. But you got to look beyond the belief. You got to look beyond the words and the simplistic, anthropic shades that we paint it with, and look a little deeper and look into the underlying, nature of the myth, that sort of thing. For the bear example, it would be the actual thunderstorm. There are thunderstorms.
Yes, there are. Okay. All right. So if I noticed, I mean, at some point there has to be environmental differences between areas of the world. There has to be different perceptions by social structures. There has to be, I should just go ahead and bring that up for you. There has to be a certain amount of overlap because of human nature. But I think that at some point, I have to say that if I saw too much overlap, I'd have to wonder if it was just human nature, if indeed those peoples were separated long, long ago in all from one part of the world, and don't even have a story. They don't have a verbal story of having come from another people.
Yeah.
And you'd think that if they had language, when they split off, they'd have a verbal story of this other people that they came from.
Yeah.
So apparently they have more definition in a myth than they do in their own beginnings.
Okay.
So I would ask you, at what point would you say that that's too much overlap? You can't have that amount of similarity.
I don't know. The overlap thing is obviously, we have a structure. We're born with a genetic structure. We're very much related, all of us humans. And we all walk in the forest. There are many forests. Of course, some people live in the deserts. This overlap just seems to me to be a natural outgrowth of combination of our environment and our genetics, and also it rolls from generation to generation. The fact that we don't have myths of our beginnings that go back too clearly is kind of like genetic drift. Like my grandpa told just a couple of stories about the old country, which I got secondhand, and we lost most of that history, about what happened in Czechoslovakia and Russia, where they came from. And that's going to drift out. And then, but there are elements that we will always recreate. And I think we tend to recreate them in the same way. Humans are very much alike in structure. And because of that, we end up with the same myths over and over again. We all fall in love,
Sure.
Or 99.9% of us. And that is, so those archetypes are always going to be there. And that's a natural outgrowth of genetics. And I don't know. I don't know what amount of overlap. I guess if two identical languages popped up, from two archaic tribes, and there was no possible connection, then we would have a lot of splaining to do. But that isn't what happens. We end up with different myths and different types of things. Like Native Americans, they have a strong earth myths, that are very much the lakes and the waters, particularly up here in northern Minnesota. I'm in southern Minnesota right now, but I'm from the north. But those are things that I grew up with, and I just think that those are pretty common all over the world. I don't know.
If you don't mind, what do you mean by grow up with? Just, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I grew up really close to a number of reservations with Native Americans, and we had Native American friends, and so the cultural stories, filtered down, and we went to these oh God, I can't remember their names. These we went to ceremonies, with Native Americans, and that part of it was part of my upbringing. So, and it was very much an earth thing. We all lived in the earth up there, and we mined iron ore out of huge holes in the ground, and we farmed the North Woods, and we raised cattle and animals, and all of that is pretty common to human beings. That became part of our myth. Like, for instance, I grew up on a farm where we had a small commercial butcher shop, and killing and eating meat became a part of my mythos and my culture. So that now when I eat a steak, I see the entire process of bottle feeding a calf all the way up to killing it, murdering it, butchering it, cutting it into pieces. And that happens to me every time I eat a steak. That doesn't happen to many modern people. Modern people go to the supermarket, right? And it's like, the food store, and you look at the package, you don't see all of what I see.
Right.
So,
right.
And
same for me, because I grew up in a farming community.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You're very close to the earth. I don't see how those archetypes would not pop up in multiple cultures and have the same,
Do you think that, and I'll pick on Christianity, not because I'm, but you're probably most familiar with Christianity, yes?
Buddhism and Christianity.
You're most familiar with Buddhism.
Well, I don't read any of the texts. I have not read the Bible. I have not focused on Buddhist texts, but I consider myself a materialist Buddhist. They call me a Moodist on rational skepticism. And they have a little cow picture. They call me a Moodist because I'm a hard atheist. I am a strict naturalist. I perceive everything in terms of naturalistic phenomena, and I consider myself a Buddhist on top of it because I was blessed with a grand mal spiritual experience at the age of 15.
We should have to talk about that sometime, but
yeah, it modified my entire life. So
having said what you've said, I definitely should pick on Christianity, and not Buddhism, although I am familiar with that to some extent.
I love picking on Christianity.
What's that?
I love picking on Christianity.
Who doesn't? I love it. Okay, so if you would agree with me that Christians don't always perfectly follow what they say their Bible recommends.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. And if that's true, they're not only biased, they're also incapable of performing their own religion.
I don't know if I would go that far, but yeah, they're biased, and they
What makes you
often.
think they're capable?
What's that?
What makes you think they're capable of fulfilling all those laws and such?
Oh, no, they can't possibly live up to that standard. I think the whole point of Christianity is to fail and to not live up to that standard. My favorite Buddhist is Ellen Watts, and he defines Christianity as a game, which is very much like Cops and Robbers, that we played when we were kids. It's like, and like God is like, okay, I'll be the good guy, and the devil's like, okay, I'll be the bad guy, and we'll scare the hell out of these people, and we'll stretch them, and we'll give them impossible commands like don't think about sex. That's a good one. And it's like, so Christianity is almost like a game of, that stretches the world out between good and evil. And if you want to play that game, which I don't, I think it's an ugly game. It's an ugly, dark game. You're in for a hell of a ride, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I had a child, say a boy, say that boy's about 14 years old, and he's not doing very well in math in school, and I say, I need to get this boy a tutor, and I just don't have the time, so I'm going to find someone else. So who I'm going to select as a tutor is someone that I know is very, very biased about math, and their idea of math puts them in a position where they put others down for not understanding math. But then when they try to explain it, math, they dance around the topic a lot and never really get to the point. Worse than that, I look at this guy as a possible tutor for my son, and the guy is apparently he says he can't even do math very well. Now, you'll forgive me, but I don't think that's a good tutor.
No.
Okay, so why should I believe Christians about the Bible?
I wouldn't.
Okay. I don't.
No, I don't either. I deal mostly with young Earth creationists online. That's my my big fight on my channel, and they are wasting
your time.
Well, I know. A guy from the Encode project sent me a really interesting link. I'll see if I can pull it up for you. But
please do.
Yeah. You know about the Encode project?
Briefly.
Okay. Anyway, they always talk about the Encode project. It'll take me a minute to find it here. But
would this be Standing for Truth? I'm not afraid to say his name.
Oh yeah, he loves the Encode project. He thought so I reached out to the Encode project and I asked them why. Let's see here, Ronnie, beautiful. Okay, I asked them why they were producing this garbage about the genome being 100% functional, and they were giving creationists fodder, and stuff. And this guy reached out to me and he said, number one, we don't use the word 100% functional anymore. And my goodness, why can I not find this comment?
You will give him enough.
Oh, okay. So when I told him I was fighting with creationists, he said, well, you know what they say, don't mud wrestle a pig. You'll just get dirty and the pig enjoys it. So
there's truth in that.
Yeah, Encode is like the creationists love the Encode project. Well, that's what somebody who was pretty high up in the Encode project, that's what they think of them. So they don't speak highly of creationists, but anyway.
Can you put that in private chat so I can bring that up for you?
Oh, you mean that quote? Okay.
Oh no, not the quote necessarily, but the article he linked you.
Oh, no, he didn't link me an article. He just
I misunderstood.
These are personal emails. So
okay, I misunderstood. Never mind.
I can't reveal who he is. I don't want to get him in trouble. So
you don't want to dox him then?
I don't want to dox him. No.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Private.
Yeah, I don't think there is a scientist or scientific team who within their own field of study would make a statement like standing for truth they're made.
Yeah.
Saying 100% is fun. We don't know that.
Right. No, we don't.
We're
not even close to 12% yet, and we suspect 12% is functional. But then, the word functional in the genome is very, very complex. I mean, it's all functional in that, like, if you imagine that you have two beads out here, okay, the link between the beads, well, it doesn't matter what's in the link. The link is important. You have a thread, and that's the way chromosomes work. They're stretched out in threads, and chromosomes are organized in the nucleus wonderfully. They have clusters. And the fact that you have this length of chromosome with these sections that don't really do anything other than connect up two important pieces, that sort of thing. And the cell is it's an incredibly complex unfolding. You ever heard the term autopoetic?
Just now.
Okay, autopoiesis is auto-creating. It's self-creating. And it's championed by a number of wonderful philosophy of the mind people, Evan Thompson, Lakoff, Merleau-Ponty, Francisco Varela. Anyway, they talk about the autopoietic nature of life, that life self-creates. Life starts out as way back as chemical gradients, and it self-created itself all the way up to where we are now. And life is this wonderful self-creating force. It's called autopoiesis. And I always misspell it. It's Autopoiesis.
I wouldn't have expected the E near the end of poiesis.
Yeah. Poiesis, something like that. Anyway, it's on the wiki. You can read about it. But anyway, Evan Thompson and Varela, they believe in something called the embodied mind. They believe that consciousness is not just in the brain, but it's in the body. And I extend that to something I call the enworlded mind, where I don't believe that my mind is just in my body and brain, but it's in the world around me. Right now, you are entering into my mind, and you are very much a part of my mind as an interacting person, even though I don't know where the hell you are, but I'm in Minnesota anyway.
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
New Mexico. Okay. We're a long ways away, but yet we have become a part of each other's mind, and our mind is sort of a continuous thing that happens in the world and in our bodies, for hopefully 100 years, or, I'm hoping I can get that. And anyways, I think I just went way the hell off topic.
We do that sometimes.
We do.
Let's see if we can drag it back, if we can cooperatively get that done. Okay, so you in the self-replication, the self-maintenance of a cell. I personally have a problem with what is colloquially called, it's not an accurate way to describe it, but what is called interdependence of functions.
Okay.
And I would give a for instance of say I gave you an engine, and I gave you all the instructions to assemble the engine. But as I was putting it together, I wrote some of the instructions on the inside, and some of the when I got it completed, I wrote some of the instructions on the outside. And then I took the engine completely apart and gave it to you and said, "Here's your engine with instructions."
Right.
It seems to me a logical problem that you can't have a simpler polymerase to read DNA.
Yeah.
So you can't have one part by part. That wouldn't do anything. But you need a polymerase to read DNA. But the code for the polymerase is on the DNA, which you need a polymerase to read.
Right. Right. And that's fairly typical of living systems. And this auto generation from, it's kind of like a fractal, and it sort of auto generates from the inside. And there's different axes or dimensions in life, right? There is the developmental evolutionary dimension, and then there's the dimension of our own life. But I draw a picture, and I did a video recently. I call it the morning, the weather report. And I did a video at the end of it. It was a little drawing on my iPad. And I showed how the germline comes along. We have these germlines, and we're all part of, one big germline. We're all part of all life. We're all connected by, these lines. And then the germ pops up a little mushroom. Mushrooms exist mostly underground. So most of the mushroom is actually, you never see it. The mushroom is just a sex organ that pops up. Well, we are the sex organs that pop up out of these gametes, and we live for about 100 years, and our job is to shoot out another one or two or three, and it goes on. So there's our germline, going up, our lifeline, and then of course we crumble back into the forest and hopefully we become part of a tree, and it's just all a wonderful autopoetic is about the only way I can say it. You could pronounce it autopoetic, because it is poetry, and there's this amazing connection of all life, in all different directions, and that's where I use my imagination plus evolution and genetics to come up with sort of a wonderful feeling that I am a part of everything else. And the Buddhist comes into the equation when I think that I am this mushroom. And when I die, all these other mushrooms are going to keep popping up. And why should I give a damn if they have my memories and my looks and my great looks and my, my personality? Why am I attached to myself? And so I give up myself, that sort of thing. So I think selflessness is the logical extension of strict naturalism, is what I believe. That you will get to a point where you become unattached to yourself, if you really think about it. So, anyway, Christianity.
Yeah. What about Christianity?
God, it's a dark thing. I am so, particularly the young Earth creationists, Standing for Truth, and those guys are just driving me nuts with this genetic entropy. They actually believe that their children, yeah, me too, that their children are more mutated than they are, and their grandchildren are even more mutated yet.
Would you like to take a moment and describe why that's not true?
Genetic entropy. Basically, you have that entire stretch of genes, right? And there's all kinds of mutations that happen on it. And this is going to get a little complicated, but if you mutate the gene that makes one protein, you can change about 50% of those things. It isn't going to make any difference to the protein function, okay? And most of the places that mutations land aren't going to make a difference. But as soon as they do make a difference, you're going to have a situation, most of like 50% of the pregnancies, you don't even know that there was a pregnancy, because something went wrong in the genetics. There was a mutation, and that thing never actually turned into a viable, embryo. Right. So God is the greatest abortionist of all time. He kills about 50% of us before we even get started. So there's this pressure from the top of, it's called purifying selection, where when the mutational load will get to a certain point, and when it goes above that, all those people will be taken out. And the other thing that happens is with 7 billion of us, if I have a mutation, the chances of it fixating in the population are about nil. I mean, they're just very, very low because of the size of the population. It'll drift out most of the time.
Well, that makes me ask, what's the perfect population size?
What's that?
What's the perfect population size then? Because one or two ends in no mutation to be selected for, no new mutations, but then apparently 7.75 billion is so big of a pool that you can't get a mutation to take over. So what's the perfect population size?
Well, there isn't going to be a lot of evolution in the human race with the way we're handling ourselves and the kind of creatures we are. We're not going to change all that much, I don't think, but we are gonna change a little bit. But there would have to be like a worldwide catastrophe, zombies. Okay, if the zombies finally show up, we would end up separating into little groups, and we become tribes. Well, then we become small tribes. So the perfect population for massive change in speciation would be somewhere between 100 and 1,000, maybe. Maybe a few hundred individuals, and then you're going to end up with those mutations fixing in the population, and the people that survive are going to be that new species. So
there's a tribe like that that's been very isolated for a very, very long time at about that populace.
Yeah.
And now they're missing 3 out of 5 fingers. And most of them are missing 3 out of 5 toes.
Do they need them?
In fact, their feet and hands are greatly split. They call them, you could look up ostrich people.
Never heard of them. That's amazing. But yeah,
they need them. Well, need is an interesting word. They obviously are surviving without the rest of their fingers and toes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and they may develop entirely different brains, and all kinds of things may change if they survive. Extinction is really common in this scenario too. A lot of these groups don't make it. So
obviously, extinction is the most likely event.
Yeah, and it's sort of a natural part of it. We keep growing and shooting and folding, and extinctions. I mean, how many billion species have gone extinct already? But that's all part of life, because we're all part of one big ball of life on this planet. But back to Christianity with that idea of genetic entropy, the idea that we are falling down and mankind is falling from some perfect position. It's just really not a very good way to think about life or humanity, I don't think. Do you? I don't know.
In my understanding of the evolutionary model, and I'm not saying Darwinistic on purpose, but there is no such thing as an improvement or maladaptation. There's no such thing. There's only change over time.
Yeah.
From what I understand. So it's in order to make the statement, man is getting less fit, if you said it that way.
Right.
Well, you're already out of the model by the time you finished the sentence.
Right. And that's why they're out of the model with genetic entropy. There's no, what we're talking about is genetic change. We're not talking about going downhill or uphill. And they continually conflate evolution with bigger, stronger, whatever. They'll ask, why aren't we all as big as Brontosaurus and as powerful as Neanderthals? And it just doesn't make any sense. Hey, Smokey Saint stopped by to say hi. Did I meet you on his channel?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we did.
He is a wonderful person. So.
Okay, so I personally take issue with the idea that since the most likely thing to happen to a species is extinction, that and you can bet that's an eventuality.
Yeah.
No animal is going to continue forever, despite any amount of fixated changes.
Well, some manner of them will continue. That happens. Like you've got a population of beetles out in the forest, and 2 or 3 branches go extinct, but one branch often, I mean, if you look at it as a tree, there's always going to be more growth going on in that tree. I mean, there's a chance that, life will dead end at some point, but that will be because of environmental influences. I think as long as the environment does not change really rapidly, we won't have a mass extinction of all life. We will survive. But not for long.
I'm not trying to sharpshoot you. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Please give me the benefit of the doubt on that, I'd appreciate it if you would. What do you make of John C. Sanford's work, if you're familiar?
He is.
And how do you justify if you don't take that work seriously?
Right. I don't take it seriously because he has misrepresented Chimera and Chimera's model. He doesn't know anything. He is not trying to solve a problem in science. He is trying to promote creationism, and that's his whole point. He where is it? I'm trying to this is actually Chimera's book. John Sanford misrepresents this, and they cherry pick quotes out of this book. And here's another book by Chimera and Crow, which they also misrepresent. And looking at his work, he was educated a long time ago. He created the gene gun. He made a bunch of money. Now his whole life is spent convincing. For some reason, they want to convince the world that evolution is not happening the way it's happening. And they're very confused about it because now they believe, they have this whole new rhetoric that they are doing real science. All, 30,000 of them on this planet are doing real science, and the other 7 billion of us are fools, and we're in this conspiracy. And
why is it 30,000 versus 7 billion?
I think I don't know how many, or 30 million creationists. I'm sorry, there are 30 million of them. Well, in the United States, they did a poll, and like 50% of the people didn't believe in evolution, which is pretty. But anyway, 99.9% of scientists just accept evolution as sort of an underlying thing. They don't necessarily believe in evolution the way they think we believe in things, but they don't know of any other way it could have happened. So that's,
well, I'm sure that people, whatever their belief is,
right,
feel that they have justification and assuredness within that belief. They wouldn't call it a belief.
Right. Yeah, when you think about life, I mean, it's really hard to figure out how something like life happened by itself, that nobody was tinkering and putting it together. But then when you think about how would we as human beings engineer another living being?
Well, we're starting to figure that out, aren't we?
We're working on it, and we're working on it for very good reasons and some bad ones. But we cannot do it. It's a process that requires an intelligent world. You see, they have it backwards. They think that intelligence created the world and created life. Well, actually, the world created intelligence, which created us. So it's the other way around. The world is the intelligent thing that created us. The fact of the Earth, and the Earth is kind of it's a unique planet. It's in that zone where temperature, where water is. Yeah.
What do you mean by unique?
Oh, the Goldilocks zone. Water, not unique. There are a lot of other Earth-like planets out there, but we're in that zone where very interesting things can happen in chemistry. If you're in the sun, you pretty much end up with just, plasma, right? If you're at the center of the sun. If you're out on Jupiter, you end up with a bunch of frozen gases and not a lot going on. But if you're in the Earth, you have this incredible complexity that just blows out of the fact of this temperature range that we're in. So we're in this wonderful, Goldilocks zone.
I think there's a lot of assumptions in everything that you just said. That although there's necessity within the best model that we have of those assumptions, I just feel like it's too many assumptions personally.
Okay.
And that's how I feel about it. It seems to me that if something were random, like fossilization,
okay,
and it's claimed that it's completely random.
Good point.
I'm sorry.
I don't like the word random much.
I mean,
You can't even-
mathematically, it's random.
Yeah, we can't even pull that off with computers. But okay, go ahead. Go on.
Would you prefer me to say it some other way? It's incidental. It's environmental. It's not. It's hard to predict.
It's hard to predict. Okay. We could say that a tornado, which one is probably out there right now coming at me. A tornado is very hard to predict. It's very hard to predict what it's going to look like and what its shape it's going to be. Or if you've seen a stream flowing and there's a rock in it and it does this wonderful current around it, right? Those things are very hard to predict. But calling them random, like when I imagine random, I don't know how old you are, but we used to have TVs that at 12 o'clock at night, they would turn into snow. That was random.
That is random.
That's random. The Earth isn't like that much. I mean, I don't see a lot of random on the Earth.
Okay, I'm going to use Immutable Destinies phrase for that. It's very rare.
Okay, Immutable Destiny.
We know each other a bit.
He's my partner on that channel. So,
well,
there he is.
Opinion Immutable is brilliant and interesting, and I like engaging with Immutable.
Good. I like him too.
I've not done enough of it yet to really know who he is as a person, but maybe someday we'll work toward that.
Yeah.
Okay, so my point in having asked that or said that is to say that if fossilization of bones is not like, okay, every generation will have 1% that become fossils. It's not nearly that predictable.
Yeah. Okay.
So if it is, and I'm just going to say consequential. If it's a consequence of the situation that a fossil forms,
yes,
and there's no set of predictable amount of time that's going to be attached to that, then I would expect that you could see from any given species line as it changes over time. You might have 50 very, very tiny changes in a row.
Okay.
And then you could have a gap of millions of changes.
Yep.
And then you could have another 10,000 that are very closely related but different.
Yep.
And then you could have another huge gap. I mean, it would just be completely in the air. And then you skip 10, you get 50. You skip 1 billion, you get 1. And it would just be completely unpredictable that way.
Yeah.
Now that's not what Stephen Gould saw in the fossil record, and it's not what I see.
Yeah, there's punctuated equilibria, which is what I would expect to see. If a species gets itself into a situation where there's a lot of pressure, a lot of purifying selection going on, you are going to see these little fringe mutations start to pop out, and they're going to survive. There's a wonderful little German cockroach, Blatella germanica, and they sprayed it with pyrothrins, and they killed almost all of them. But a couple survived. One survived, or a couple survived, and that thing had on its neurons. It had a little membrane pore, right, that let sodium in, and this pyrothin would attach to that and would open it up, and the sodium would pour into the neurons, and the thing would start to twitch and die. Okay, but this one had a mutation that the pyrothin would not attach to it.
Right.
But it screwed the sodium channel up so that it wasn't quite as efficient. So this bug was not quite as fast and coordinated, perhaps, as the other ones. But then when the few that managed to survive with this mutation started interbreeding, and a couple others had 2 more mutations that repaired that sodium channel, and now we have a cockroach which is totally immune to chrysanthemum is where they get this pyrothins. They kill them, and then a population comes out. But if you have like in the Cambrian, we had a great deal of life, a lot of life and diversity in the ocean, and then we had some sort of pressure. I'm not sure what the extinction event was over 10 to 30 million years, and there were forms that just popped out every which way. All of this diversity, and that was your punctuation of life, and that happens pretty frequently. Like you say, you go a long time. You can go like 100 million years and the species barely changes, and then suddenly flies out. And, we have a lot of speciation. I mean, it's called saltatory, up and down movement, saltatory movement. And I think gold was pretty much on to what happened in the Cambrian and a few other times. So I do not see a problem for evolution with that. In fact, that's what I would expect to happen. So
I just recalled that I owe you a public apology. Here's my public apology. Speed of Sound of Gravity and I were together in the same area at the same time on Smoky Saints. I posed what I thought was a challenge to him, and I think it got lost in the chat, perhaps, right, or we ran out of time, or something like that happened. At the time, I accused him of avoiding my question. And now, perceptually, at the time, a person could see that in a decent amount of reason, but it was just too busy. And I wanted to say that I am sorry that I suggested that you were being dishonest in any way. So I apologize.
Well, thank you. That's gracious. The worst insult or the worst charge that can be leveled at me is evading a question, because for some reason is in my nature, I don't want to evade anyone's questions about anything. So thank you for that. So that's why I reached out to you, and it's like, wait a minute, we got to settle this, because I was doing something else while I was watching the chat, and I wasn't I on the show at the time?
Were you on the show at the time? No, sir, not on the show I was on.
Okay, it was something else. So I was doing something else, and I missed the thread of your chat, so I kind of missed I didn't understand your question. And fair. Chat, I don't pay a lot of attention to chat. A lot of it goes by and I don't see it. So even on my own channel, I got to get better at it. But thank you very much. That's gracious. But
no, it's not gracious. It's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I agree.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about it.
You're a good man.
Well, I want to be.
Yeah.
Maybe someday I will be. Okay, so within these punctuations.
Yep.
And this might just be me. Maybe this is even just my biases. It seems to me that you could almost take the morphological change over time between an ancestral form and what we would call today a quote unquote modern form, if you will. And you could almost break it up into what I think are not necessarily in Homo sapien, or in hominids generally, but in a lot of examples, it seems you could almost break it up into even parts, that there's a fossil just as you need, and that they're very evenly spaced. And when I see that kind of even spacing, they don't look random. And I have an issue with that they don't look random. And I would give an example.
Okay.
We've got from, say, Pakicetus to Cetus.
Right.
I'd like to see somewhere from some fossil where it's not very simple, understandable, workable, and works well in reality position of two nostrils moving to the center of the forehead or the top of the snout, and then to the top of the head on the other side of the brain.
Okay.
Oh, it's a very even set of steps.
Yeah.
And some of the issue that I have with things like that, and that's one example in several that I would give. it doesn't work well for me. You'd have to jump in a Gould kind of way from one side of the brain, the front of the brain, all the way to the back in one singular step.
Okay.
Because to have either two nostrils on one on each and esophagus, etc., on the outside of the brain doesn't make any sense. But then on the other hand, you couldn't split it either.
Yeah.
So it seems like a very convenient set of steps. And I don't know how you could actually bridge those things. And I have to ask the question, why are they so evenly spaced in something that's random, though you don't like the word random?
Blind luck for the fossil hunter? I don't know. But another possible, I mean, going from the nostril being in one place and going to another place can happen fairly quickly, I think, in a lineage. You know, it isn't like little tiny steps. And finding, I guess it surprises me that you find them so evenly spaced. I mean, we felt we were really lucky to find those spacings, and I'm sure we're going to find more, and there's going to be other variations. I don't know how to answer that exactly.
I don't believe in luck or happenstance.
Okay.
Or I just don't assign value to those ideas.
When it comes to hunting fossils, I don't know what else it can be, but really incredible luck to find any fossil at all. Fossils are pretty rare. I don't think it's 1%.
In which case?
In every case. When I was a child, we had this river, and we would go to the spot, and there was half a wagon wheel sticking out of the dirt, and we dug around a little bit, and we found remnants of a farmhouse, and we found out from our parents that there was a farmhouse there in like the 1930s, and it was so completely gone. And of course, the farmers were not fossilized. I assume they hauled them off somewhere. But
they may be fossilized. You can't tell. It depends on where they were buried.
But I mean, finding fossils is they have to bury, and they have to be in an anoxic environment, and you're not going to find a lot of them. But the fact that the Pakicetus to the cetus is evenly spaced is something that I hadn't heard before and hadn't seen. But you have an idea about that.
Oh, I already explained it in my opening.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That what we're seeing is samplings, and the samplings, in order to be effective and to create the environment we now experience, would have to be graduating. You'd have to have graduating samples. Okay,
so your idea is that there was somebody tinkering with us every step of the way?
No, that it was tinkered with before it ever got here.
Before it ever got here. Okay. That the fossil evidence was planted?
No, it would happen quite naturally.
Okay. I'm not sure if I totally understand what you're suggesting. So.
Well, a Christian would argue with me. You might not. It's Genesis 2. Never get this straight. 2:5, or it's either 2:5 or 2:3. It's the paragraph that ends, "And there was no man to till the earth." There's a line in there that's talking about the main character, God, claiming to own things. That's the general context of the passages. And one of the claims is every plant before it was in the earth. Well, that's a direct claim of having living plants or material objects not on the planet.
Okay.
Now, Christians will stick a comma in there because they need to. Their brain's going to stick that comma in and say, and they're going to read it, or I've at least heard one Christian read it, and every plant before it was in the earth. Well, that's out of context for the whole thing. It's a completely wrong idea, and the translators never felt like that comma should be there. It doesn't appear in the text.
Okay.
So when the translators were reading it in context, they didn't feel like there should be a comma. The context is continuous. It doesn't indicate a comma. The subject matter is continuous. It does mean plants not on the earth.
Okay.
But Christians will say, well, God doesn't own solid things. I don't know where that comes from, since we're on a planet that is claimed to be owned by God.
Yeah.
So what's actually claimed in the text, you'll never see claimant of making an animal aside from human being. You'll never see a claim anywhere in the text, or for that matter, I think, that there's some kind of claim of making any plant. No animals or plants are created; they're only placed here.
Okay.
And then in another story, it says borrowing from your neighbor as you leave, and there's a lot of, I mean, I could just go on like that forever about it, and you'd get bored. So what I'm saying is, I think there's necessity within the text. It's what's being described as terraforming by living beings, not of this earth.
Right.
Very, very purposeful and metered.
That basically, okay, so you're positing an alien race that created our biome.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's a necessity of this, all the stories worldwide of an ancient nature.
Yeah, and when would they have done this that we would have captured it in these stories? Is what I'm wondering about. Like, when would it have happened?
Captured it in the stories.
For it to be captured, or something to be captured in Genesis, for us to have known about it, or
Can you tell me the story of when you were 25,000 days old?
You mean
it's that simple?
What I did? Okay.
Yeah.
I was in northern Minnesota, and
that's not what I mean. I mean, you've already told me the story.
Right.
It's a lovely little story. You actually did it. You can recall it easily. You could tell it 1,000 times.
Okay.
So they're just telling what they did.
Oh, so
it's not like you started that journal by saying something like, I am now 1 day old.
Yeah.
No, you're recalling a time when you were 1 day old.
Yeah.
You're talking about a time when even if you can't even remember it in this case, you're talking about something that happened in the past. It's simple. It's easy. Anyone could do that. Okay.
So you think that they were talking about something that they knew about from the past, but how?
By their own intervention. They did it.
They did it.
They did it, and they're writing about them doing it. It's that
okay.
easy, just like your 25,000th day.
Okay, so the Bible was also written by these aliens.
Yes, yes. Of course, all the religions would, by necessity, had to have been written by this same group.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, not convinced, but maybe.
I didn't think it was convincing. I thought it was a plausible explanation for the existence of things as we observe them. Yeah. I didn't say it was. It's not even persuasive yet.
Yep. Yeah, I find my evolution to be my plausible.
But you understand I'm claiming evolution.
What's that?
You understand that, right?
Yep.
I'm claiming that evolution did happen. I think it evidently did happen. I don't think that scientists are in this big conspiracy to say, oh, look, this part of this genome, which is equal to that part of that genome, has the same dysfunctions in it in exactly the same place. I don't think they're lying.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think it's way too convenient to say that we have these nearly metered steps to give us all the evidence that we need that evolution did happen.
Oh, you think? Okay.
And we have all of the genetic survey to say it did happen. We got that too. That's fine. But why is it not more random? Why would an accidental or incidental set of environmental pressures select for it to be in different places doing the same function? That doesn't make any sense to move it. You lose energy moving things.
Okay.
That's unwise if it costs energy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see things like that and I go, okay, that part of it doesn't make any sense to me logically. You can explain it scientifically, that's fine.
Yep. Or you can explain the fossil record. I don't know. Like I say, I've never seen it explained that way with these evenly spaced steps. I think the whale is one of the well, we have the horses. I think we have a good fossil record for them.
Just find me one that doesn't work that way, where we don't get like a nice. Okay, we got this. It used to be that, and
humans
not perfect. Not always like thirds or something like that.
Well, we've got a lot. We've got a lot of hominids to dig up yet. In
I
order
said
to
that was the exception. Yes.
yeah, in order to come up with a really good record for humans.
Mhm.
But you think that those were planted too? That
What do you mean by
basi-
planted?
Well, that they were that fossils were planted to give us the
I never
evidence.
said that.
Okay, I'm not sure what you're saying then.
I'm
How do
saying
you
fossils naturally occur because those animals lived on the planet.
Okay,
But the reason we have the fossils we have is because it's the only fossils available.
okay,
It was the only kind of animal there at the time. There was no gradual variation that happened here.
okay. Oh, okay.
But what the spiritual stories are claiming is that the intelligent that terraformed the planet took necessary samplings from an evolutionary process, which was messed with, using like code in different places because it didn't matter to them where they put it. As long as the hierarchy of the controls is correct, they don't care.
Yeah.
They just wanted a certain kind of animal for a certain purpose, and they made it. And then,
So
the first, what I would call Homo sapiens, the first human being in the universe, was in a position to borrow from that whole range, the entire spectrum, and took what they needed. They were allowed to take what they need. That is the story of Moses.
Okay.
Or Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
Unapishtim, whichever one. I mean, there's all these overlapping stories.
Okay. You have a number of videos on your channel. I think I probably should have done my homework, but you kind of, you reached out to me this morning. Right? What's that?
It's a nice first talk.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. I think your videos will help me understand your position more carefully. So
most of them won't.
I'll probably really.
No, most of them won't, because most of them is me answering other people's challenges, not me explaining what this is.
Okay, but
do
you intend to
a chance to explain what this is?
Do you intend to do that?
I really should get on that, shouldn't I?
You should. Me too.
It would be so helpful. And yeah, you're not the first person to recommend that I should do that, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
My question is, who's going to watch 30 hours worth of video?
Right.
Who's going to bother?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about with my. I want to develop this whole basis of naturalism and my ideas about the mind, and I think it's going to bore everybody to death. So far, it has.
Quite possibly. But, there's a lot of humans out there that can find your channel. You're going to find an audience. It may take some time.
I figured it would take 3 years.
Who is additionally brilliant. I love Nerdy Rodent.
Oh.
How many aliens per planet? I don't understand the question. There's nothing to indicate how many aliens per planet, unless you're talking about their perspective toward us, in which case I'd say about 7.75 billion right now. What about the Cambrian explosion? The Cambrian explosion works really well for me and not for evolution.
Oh, I think it works good.
If you want to, I'm going to give you a chance to answer to him too, if you like. Going from single-celled animals or life forms, animals is incorrect, into simple collectives, into the history of the Earth's third best eye in one step makes zero sense, especially when some of those one-celled animals had shells. Okay. And we see shells in the Cambrian explosion as well. I'd like to see some bridging between the two. Aside from that, in the Cambrian layer in Queensland, Australia, there is a placental live birth giving fish called Materpecies attenboroughi, named after David Attenborough. And I've heard challenges by Dawkins saying things like, if we ever found a bunny with dinosaurs, there's your bunny with the dinosaurs. You can say whatever you want about it. It should not be there.
Can you link that name for me so I can look that up?
Materpecies attenboroughi. If you Google that, it'll spell correct for you.
Okay.
Just do the best you can. It's those are famous words.
Okay.
Motherfish Attenborough.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Good. I'll look that up. Yeah.
You were talking about the Cambrian explosion.
Oh, the Cambrian explosion. I think there was some sort of a near extinction event or a environmental pressure, and there was an influx, I believe, at that time of minerals, calcium, into the ocean. And I don't know a lot about paleontology. I just know the genetics. But for these different body plans to form, at that particular time, mates were not chosen by how cool looking they were. They were they blasted sperm out into the ocean. And so there was an opportunity for a great deal of speciation all at once. And if there was sufficient pressure for that speciation, you're going to see a vast array of mutations. The other thing is that oftentimes an organism, when it's under pressure, and they're finding more about this epigenetically, it will be changed so that it mutates much faster. So if you put like Lenski's bacteria under pressure, some of the strains started mutating at about 1 million times faster than the other strains. And when you end up with that, you end up these small changes. Small changes in body plan can be created by very tiny changes in genetics. So if you change the timing of the formation of the embryo, you are going to end up with pretty significant changes in body plans. And of course, that would have happened. It has to happen incrementally, or the thing will die. I mean, if it doesn't make sense, it'll die. But the pathway that makes sense will generate a great deal of diversity. And I think we'll see that again sometime. Or if we were to look carefully out into the ocean at all those prokaryotes and archaea out there, or if we were able to see all that's going on in our forests right now, we would see these radiations in certain species and bugs and things like that. So anyway, that's just my take on it. And of course, I'm an idiot, but it is getting extremely threatening out here. I need to go and close some doors and windows.
It's actually pretty good timing that we just go ahead and stop now.
Yep. Okay. Good enough.
I hope to pick this up again sometime at your leisure. I'm semi-retired. I have a lot of free time. I keep free time just to do this sort of thing and to meet interesting and intelligent people like you. And you don't have to share that opinion. It's my opinion.
Okay.
You don't have to agree with me. But I found you interesting and engaging and honest. And those are and logical. And those are the things that I look for.
Okay.
In fact, it's the only things I ask for. So I appreciate you coming on. Would you shill your channel one more time? If you would, tell people a little bit about what you've been doing on there while I bring up your link.
We did a really harsh video last night on John Maddox and Logical, Plausible, and True, because we disagree with just about everything about that man. And let's see, how can I put it in private chat again?
What?
Oh, my chat. You said that you asked me to share my channel. You're already doing it, right?
I said, would you speak about it while I brought up your link?
Oh, speak about it. Okay. Anyway, we're doing a variety of things. I'm trying to get a couple of things going. One of the things I'm trying to do is I get up in the morning and I do a morning report, and I try to cover the creationist channels and what is going on. And then we do some takedown videos. I know. Mud wrestle a pig and you just get dirty. And we're getting dirty, and we got really nasty last night. I recommend that nobody watches the first part of that video with the Mad Bull on it. But the second part of the video, we actually did a pretty good job, and we calmed down a bit, and we were nicer to John Maddox. And, I think we always talk a little bit about science and genetics, and we try to educate. And I'm hoping to do more of that. I'm trying to learn production tools so that I can do decent educational videos. That is the goal.
I think I know someone who is very good at that sort of thing and loves donating time. Would you like me to? Yes.
Yes. Put me in touch.
I'll put you in touch right now because these people already know him, most of them.
Okay.
And that's Peter D. Tucker with 2 Ks, no C, D. Tucker, and his channel on YouTube, and also the name of his Facebook is Gonna Go For It.
Gonna go for it?
Yep.
Okay. Is that one word?
Brilliant. He's very good at exactly the sorts of things you're talking about.
Okay, good. I will get in touch with him. We could use some help. I'm also hooking up with a logic professor from one of the local colleges. We're planning on hopefully putting out a logic textbook and some interactive tools to basically prove logical constructs and educate. So we're doing that too.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your humanitarian work, or at least that's what I take your effort as being.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So, guys, that's it for this particular episode. I'd like to give special thanks to our guest, Mike. Be sure to check out what he's doing on his channel. And if you like what he's doing, please like and subscribe. At least vote on his videos for him so that the algorithm recognizes him as a living entity.
Yes.
That would be very, very kind of you.
That would be nice.
All right. So any last words, things you'd like to close with, Mike, before we shut this thing down?
No, other than that, I think my house is going to blow away.
I pray for you that it doesn't. I know that means very little to a non-theist, but okay. I hope for you that it doesn't.
Okay.
Well, guys, thanks
you.
a lot for showing up and participating. Thank you, Mike. And I want you all to know that I really do look forward to the day that we're all great friends.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.